Teachers, what was the worst thing a substitute teacher did while you were gone? I came back after being gone one day, and my students told me the substitute teacher flipped over tables in a rage and was escorted from the building by a cop. What actually happened is that sub left the room to take a 20-minute phone call, and the kids thought it would actually be funny to flip the tables over. The substitute then had to flip the tables right side up while yelling at the kids. Then during lunch, my special ed co-teacher came into the room to set up and caught the sub making out with a student. Turns out she was 18 and he was 25, and the 20-minute phone call was to schedule a making out session with the student. The principal then had him escorted from the building by the resource officer. This is why I say having a sub is more work than just coming into school. My damn self. My man was so down bad that he had to become a substitute teacher and prey on the young. Not to say 18 is young. Well, yeah, 18's young, but technically is an adult. Story 2. When I was in high school, there was a sub that would sleep. He would literally introduce himself, pull out his hearing aids, and knock out. There was also this substitute who wouldn't let us do any work. She would start class, tell us what our teacher left us to do, and then before starting, she would introduce herself. This included 40 minutes of talking about her entire life and showing us pictures of her cats. And she would just chastise you for being disrespectful if you did anything but listen to her. My teacher came back the next day. I was like, oh, why didn't any of my classes get anything done? Yeah, as sad as it is, there's just not a lot of sub teachers available. Because I remember being a kid myself, a lot of the substitutes were just god-awful. They either took their job way too serious or did not take it serious enough. It was never in the middle. Story 3. I was a teacher's assistant while in college. The teacher and I took a week-long workshop and had a sub. The worst thing she did was not letting the kids go potty. It was in kindergarten, and she said all the kids going to the bathroom were interrupting the class. One girl wet herself. School policy was if kids under a certain age had an accident, the nurse would give them a pull-up, basically a diaper to wear. The substitute proceeded to make fun of the girl for wearing a diaper, calling her a baby and such. The little girl ended facing repercussions at home too. It's devastating to hear about. Alright, where's the justice though? I want to hear this teacher getting fired or blackballed from the schools because that's pretty ridiculous. How are you going to make fun of a kid in kindergarten for wearing a diaper that you caused? She literally was the cause that she had to pee herself and then makes fun of her for doing it. I will never understand why people choose careers that involve children when they don't like children. It's like, why are you going to become a teacher just to become a hag? If you don't like children, pick another job. The worst part is teachers don't even make that much money, so there's not really that much of a financial incentive for them to even want to work there. Story 4. One of my substitute teachers did that to me in 2nd grade. Thankfully, it was a Wednesday, which meant my dad was picking me up instead of me taking the bus, which meant he proceeded to ream that lady a new a-hole. It was so humiliating. I was only 6, maybe 7. I don't remember how far into the year it was, but I had long been able to not pee my pants. My dad was very protective and did not take kindly to the sub making me sit for over an hour at the end of the day, begging to go to the bathroom. Yeah, teachers be doing too much, man. It's like, sure, I understand kids do take advantage of going to the bathroom when they don't need to use it. But come on, it's not a big deal. It's better to let someone abuse the system than someone to get hurt by that system. Story 5. My student's favorite story is when I peed my pants in 8th grade. I teach health, and by its nature, we cover very uncomfortable and inappropriate topics. The first week is spent emphasizing the need for understanding and empathy, and the bravery it takes for people to share personal stories that are not allowed to leave the room. There are exceptions, but I'm not going to get into them here. And doing exercises to build those qualities. At the end of the week, if I feel they understand the culture of the class, I read a story about what middle school was like before cell phones, then share my story about how I peed my pants in 8th grade. It was absolutely mortifying at the time. Well, I think it's effing hysterical now. Either those kids kept their crap seriously under wraps, or they really respected the culture I tried to foster, because I never heard a peep out of anyone about how I peed my pants. And I've done this in 2 different high schools and 3 different middle schools. Maybe it's because this person was a cool teacher. I mean, this is how school goes. Listen, if you are a respected teacher, no one's going to try to mess with you. But if the kids don't respect a teacher, they're going to eat you alive. And that's just how it goes. Story 6. I got written up a lot in junior high. Teachers would say, you get 2 bathroom breaks a semester. Laminated hall pass or whatever. I didn't care. If I had to go to the bathroom, I got up and went to the bathroom. Eventually, I had enough write-ups that it was supposed to be a serious repercussion time, but the guidance counselor took my side. She was no BS. Cool. I wasn't disruptive. I just went to the bathroom when I needed to. I also had some weird sort of eye problem where I needed to wear sunglasses indoors for a while. Family still makes vampire jokes. Subs despise me. I remember one time bald guy tells me, hey, Too cool for school? Lose the sunglasses. I told them they were a medical necessity. Oh, so the teacher says, oh, do you have a doctor's note? I did, in fact, have a doctor's note. Junior high was the most petty BS place I've ever been. At least in high school, teachers mostly ignored me. Yeah, what's up with these bathroom passes, the limited passes? That makes no sense. To think that a person only needs to go to the bathroom twice a semester is the most ridiculous thing I've heard of. It sounds like these teachers are a little ignorant and maybe never took anatomy class. Story 8. The substitute gave out snacks I bought with my own money that I kept for kids who stayed after to get tutoring. Threw out a broken electric pencil sharpener that kids broke in front of her, which again, I bought with my own money and couldn't get replaced by the company because I had no product to send back. I still don't have a sharpener for my room. She also let the kids go through my things in my cabinets and desk. Lost a bunch of stuff that way. Again, substitutes are just a different breed. Teachers can already be bad enough. When I say this, trust me, there's a bunch of beautiful souls out there that are teachers. But there's also a lot of bad eggs that are teachers. But a substitute is like a bad teacher on steroids. They're the final boss of bad teachers. That's how it goes. Story 9. The substitute teacher asked a deaf kid to take off his hearing aids. The kid tries to tell her he needs them. But to her, they looked like headphones. She cried when she was confronted by another teacher. When I was in 6th grade, I fractured my wrist, but it was my dominant hand, so I had to poorly write with my right. Teacher forced me to write with my left while I had a cast. Then a couple months go by, and I got my cast off. The sub told me to suck it up and write with my left hours after getting my cast off. It felt like jelly. It was just so much pain. Teacher was fired at the end of 7th grade because of unnecessary complaints. Story 10. In middle school, we had a thing where if you were failing when progress reports came out, our football coach would make us do physical punishments. Well, I had missed 2.5 weeks of school due to pneumonia, so when I came back, I had an insane amount of rework to be completed. My teachers had put that work in as zeros until I completed the work, so I was technically failing. My coach made me run until I was turning blue and falling every couple steps. My knee and hands were scraped and bloody. Another coach saw me and sent me to the nurse's office. My dad was madder than I knew he was capable of. He was screaming at the principal that he wanted to see the coach who didn't believe me. The principal told him he didn't think that was a safe idea at the time. Yeah, were these back in the 90s or 80s? I just couldn't picture stories like this bad nowadays with all the snowflakiness around. Especially with cancel culture. You breathe in one wrong direction and you'll be fired immediately. So the fact this went on is just, I don't know how this even went on. Unless this had to be decades ago. Story 11. I had a friend in high school whose dad was a reporter for the town's newspaper. We were on the rowing team together as well as others. Well, one day, there was a threat of a rather large rainstorm, and the coach sent us all out anyways. My boat came back early for repairs because a rower snapped their oarlock. His boat finished too. Girls varsity got caught and swamped. Someone called 911 or something, because they could see the girls in the water. Friend's dad, being the sports reporter, came down too, because he heard the commotion. Our coach at the time was not popular, to put it lightly. So my friend's dad and him are talking, and he's writing notes. So my coach asked him point blank if he's asking questions as a reporter or a parent. He says reporter. Coach immediately stops talking and blatantly ignoring him. Dad looks him right in the eyes, puts away his pen, and launches his notebook into the parking lot. Says parent, and just lit the guy up like a blown transformer. It was amazing. Then he went and wrote the story anyways. Story 12. I broke my wrist in the 6th grade during gym. I'd broken my wrist and my hand previously as a child, so I knew immediately when I couldn't move my hand that it was broken. The coach sent me to the nurse, who said she knew it wasn't broken because I wasn't crying. I have a pretty high pain tolerance. Always have, and wasn't much of a crier because my mom taught me to suck it up. I had 2 classes after gym that I sat through in immense pain, but my anxiety disorder made me feel too terrified of facing the nurse again. I rode the bus home and called my stepdad. Again, my mom was a suck it up kind of parent, and I knew my stepdad would leave work immediately to take me to the doctor. Sure enough, I had fractured my growth plate near my thumb and part of my wrist. My parents were furious and came with me to school the next day to discuss with the principal. A week later, we had a new school nurse. I'm telling you right now, if I'm wrong, I'm willing to bet a lot of money on this. But if I am wrong, then I don't know. There's no way I can be wrong because I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in the situation. The nurse simply gave the kid ice, and that was it. Anytime you go to a school nurse in elementary, they're just going to give you ice. I promise you. You tell them you have mental depression, they're gonna give you ice. They see that you're vomiting, they're gonna give you ice. But yeah, it begs the question, because if I'm not mistaken, you need at least 4 years of college to enter these careers. So like, how are they just lacking this much information? Like, that sounds like the most primitive thinking ever. He's not crying, must not be injured. Story 13. The substitute accused a student of stealing something that the aide had to put away. This was a class that contained some pretty rough students, including one suspended multiple times for fighting and some gang members. She decided to go after a sweet petite girl that never caused trouble and was generally popular with her classmates. This set off the entire class, which is when the sub went ballistic and started wildly throwing accusations and yelling at the said students. Security eventually got called and took several students out. My first clue was when the sub got my cell number from the staff directory and went off for 20 plus minutes about how bad my students had been. This was followed up with an extremely long email and a 2-page written note on my desk, plus a concerned note from the administrator about not having appropriate sub plans. She didn't follow them in the first place and decided to throw me under the bus. The next morning when I arrived at school, the students were waiting for me at the door. Once I got them calmed down enough to tell me their side of the story, we had a discussion on how they could have handled the situation differently. I promised them that I'll never get that sub again. On a related note, I had a good relationship with said rough children, because I treated them with respect and fairness. They usually behaved for me. Story 14. This happened to my colleague, but I was in the classroom next door. My colleague was showing Clash of the Titans at the end of the year after a unit on ancient Greece. There is mild nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie, but they were in the middle of the movie, so there shouldn't be an issue. You left the video paused at the right spot. We still had VCRs like 10 years ago when this happened, but the sub somehow managed to show both the nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie. The nudity scenes were hours apart and the class was only 40 minutes. Then, the sub wrote an email to the principal about how my colleague made him show nudity. Story 15. Lost more than half of my textbooks that I purchased myself, as well as textbooks that were school property. Administration just shrugged at this, until they found out the textbooks belonging to the school were around $120 each. Also lost all the book assignments of 4 classes I asked him to collect, so I could correct those at home. Kinda sucked for the students who did put a lot of work on it and didn't have digital copies. Also didn't teach anything that I asked him to, because he really didn't like the subject matter. Also didn't bother grading. When I checked the grades he had given out, there was only 1 grade, and everyone else was given an 8/10. Even students that didn't take my class. Oh, you gotta love to see it. You just know these substitutes just do not care. Which begs the question again, there's not much money in it, so why are they doing it in the first place? God, I'm telling you guys, substitutes are just a different breed in the universe. Don't get me mistaken though, there are some beautiful substitutes, and I don't mean appearance-wise, I just mean in the soul. So don't get mistaken, but yes, when they're bad, they are really bad. Story 16. Not a teacher, but the sub made the handicapped classmate who had a muscle, joint, and vision complications go grab his textbook from his homeroom. He's not completely helpless, but when it comes to heavy things, he needs help. The classmate's homeroom was halfway across campus, and the required book consists of 5 large text volumes because they're specifically made for his poor vision. He can't wear glasses either due to his complications. I offered to help because I'm usually the one that goes and grabs it for him during normal class, but the sub yelled at me saying he knows my kind and I'm just trying to get out of class. Sub told me he's not there to play games and for me to quit it before he sends me back to the principal's office. Needless to say, the entire class was shocked. Classmate came back with another student from the homeroom requesting that next time the sub send someone else to grab the books because my classmate can't carry it by himself. When my usual teacher came back, we requested the sub not to return because of what he said to us and did to that classmate. My teacher wrote an email to the principal about it, and that was the end of that. Yeah, teachers are weird. I mean, I have a quick little story, but teachers are just dense sometimes. Like, this was an actual teacher. I remember this one kid had autism, so he wasn't really the most well-behaved, but he wasn't a nuisance either. He was a very nice kid. But I just remember the history teacher, his face turned all red. He was fuming and just screaming at this kid. In my head, I was a pussy at the time. I was in 7th grade. What the hell was I gonna say? Not to excuse me being a bystander, but truly I was a completely different person at that time than I am now. But yeah, it was just weird to see this teacher screaming at this kid who clearly, I don't even think it's autism. I'm pretty sure the kid had Asperger's. Story 17. I had a few teachers like that. One yelled at me in front of the entire class for not having my textbook ready to turn in at the end of the year and threatened to make me pay for it when the book was at my house where it was supposed to be because I couldn't haul my textbooks back and forth. When I meekly reminded him of my 404 plan, he acted like it was my fault he forgot, as though I had hidden this fact from him the entire year. Edit. For those who don't seem to get it, I have disabilities. This wasn't just, oh, my teacher was mean, or hee hee, whoops, I damn my book. This was a teacher who decided to ignore the fact that I am visibly disabled, and instead belittled me in front of all the other students. Based on reading this, I can't tell who's worse. I can't tell if teachers are worse or bullies are worse. Because some of these teachers are straight up just basically older bullies at this point. Story 18. Not a teacher, but my 9th grade, my Algebra 1 teacher had her baby early in the year. So she was gone till the last month or 2 months of the school year. The sub was a former teacher, so you'd think she would be a great sub. Nope. She hyper-focused on 3 to 4 of the 28 students in the class and just teach them while completely ignoring the rest of us. She'd pass out a worksheet, then go to her students and never acknowledge us again, till she dismissed us. Never checked homework, never acknowledged us. If anyone outside of her favorite students raised their hand or spoke up, they were ignored, etc. Which went about as well as you would expect with a bunch of 14 to 15-year-olds. That class was just wild. The kids who actually stayed in the classroom anyway, it was a mess. I'm actually surprised we weren't reported or visited by the teachers on either side of us for how loud we were. After several months with this lady, the vice principal was walking around randomly checking classrooms and walked into our crap show Algebra 1 class. He lost it. Yelled at all of us to sit down and shut up, which she also didn't acknowledge. Demanded she leave and sat with us the rest of the period. Never saw her again, and had maybe 6 to 7 different subs after her. 2 weeks after this, our regular teacher came back. When she realized we had learned nothing and learned the extent of how useless this lady had been, she started tearing up. I passed the classroom on the way to the bathroom during the next period and saw her sobbing at her desk. A friend of my mom's worked at the central office where they assigned or organized the substitute teachers. That lady was permanently taken off the substitute list. Story 19. Had a substitute teacher in my high school French class show a movie that was just straight up softcore pee, but tried to explain that since it was in French, it was artistic. It was equally frustrating because while I wanted to see boobs, I also couldn't stop reading the subtitles because I had to understand what they were saying. The teacher did not come back that next day. Story 20. Not a teacher, but a student with a story nonetheless. Me, Mrs. Hostess. Fake name, obviously. Every time my 8th grade history teacher was out, Mrs. Hostess would usually sub for him. Not sure why, because she subbed other classes too. But all the incidents of note happened when she subbed for history. Number 1, there happened to be a girl in class who shared a name with an Irish folk song. Every time Mrs. Hostess took attendance, when she got to the folk song girl, she sang the whole song. Every time. Number 2, the history teacher kept candy and snacks in his desk. Lollipops that he would hand out for correct answers or just because. Some leftover Halloween candy and the Twinkie. The Twinkie was not an ordinary Twinkie. The Twinkie was an experiment in processed food. This Twinkie was still in its original individual packaging and looked normal at first glance, but was actually 3 years past expiration and rock solid. The history teacher demonstrated this by standing on the Twinkie during one of the first weeks of classes. All said to say, this is thoroughly inedible Twinkie. So Mrs. Hostess subbed again, and we knew she discovered the lollipop stash because she was openly eating them during class. But it wasn't until the next day that our history teacher opened his desk drawer to find that Twinkie was gone. This woman ate an expired solid Twinkie, as well as literally all the food/candy in the teacher's desk. Alright, I would like an immediate wellness check on this teacher. There's a possibility this teacher might not be alive anymore. For anyone who did this story, please check up on this teacher. I don't know about you, but I would probably say that's worse than poison, eating a 3-year-old Twinkie. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but geez. What do you think that gotta taste like? Also, how do you not recognize it's a 3-year-old Twinkie? The second I notice there's something wrong with the food, I immediately check the expiration date. Either that or this person just did not care and had a death wish.